2, 3.
Good morning. Firstly, welcome to those in the historic courtroom of the Supreme Court, which has been the home of the Supreme Court of Ireland since the court's return from Dublin Castle in 1932. And also welcome to those who are uniquely able to participate in this ceremony remotely. This is a first, so far as calls to the bar are concerned. I know that many who are participating remotely might have wished to be here as guests of those who are about to be called to the bar, but because of difficulties associated with the pandemic, that has not been possible. I should explain that it was my very strong desire that every person about to be called to the bar would be offered the opportunity to be called physically here in this historic room, should they wish. And given the numbers that indicated a wish to be so called, and the limitations caused by social distancing, which only allow 10 persons to be called at the same time, it was just not possible to fit in all of the graduates who desire to be called physically within the time available, and also to allow guests in the room. But I hope that this ceremony will be as close as possible to the norm, and that those who have the opportunity to participate, even if remotely, will enjoy it as much as they would, or almost as much as they would, if they were here present in the room. This is a short formal ceremony, but it is one of great significance. The call to the bar signifies an important step in the life of each graduate. It may mark the first step towards practice at the bar, which is, of course, a challenging and demanding profession, but one which has the potential to provide a very satisfying career. Today, you join a profession with a long history, but one which is also, in my view, of considerable contemporary importance. Membership of the profession brings with it a duty to promote and uphold the rule of law. John Philpot Curran was an inspirational Irish barrister of many years ago, who practiced over 200 years ago, and a speech of his in 1790 is the root of the famous quotation that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And I think those words summarise the raison d'etre of the legal profession in a democratic society, and the work that lies ahead of every barrister in defending liberty and thereby promoting the rule of law. I mentioned earlier that the bar remains a profession of considerable importance in contemporary Ireland. The existence of an independent legal profession to put forward the cases of litigants before our courts is a vital part of our legal system, and the role of an independent judiciary in maintaining the rule of law would be significantly impaired if that independent judiciary did not have available to it a truly independent legal profession, prepared to undertake difficult and indeed sometimes unpopular cases in a way that ensures that the judge or jury has all of the facts and arguments available so as to come to a just conclusion in accordance with law. And in that context, it is vital that you maintain a thorough knowledge of the law, not just for the purposes of advising your clients, but also assisting the court in ensuring that the law is properly applied. And I think your presence here today shows that you have demonstrated a thorough knowledge of the law. But in a constantly evolving legal framework, I think it's vital that you renew and extend that knowledge as your practice develops. And it's also of the utmost importance that you adhere to the highest ethical standards. Our court system is dependent on judges being able to trust counsel. Once lost, that trust is very hard to restore. And it's also important to remember that the perception which the public generally have of the profession of barrister depends on the experiences which clients and others have in their individual encounters. In that context, as barristers, your first obligation is, of course, to your own client, to be courageous but courteous in the way in which you advance that client's case, but also, importantly, to do so within the bounds of the rules of ethics and your duties to the court. Having said that, I will now call each graduate individually to the Bar of Ireland. Paul Joseph Moynihan. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Peter Hamilton. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Ciara Dowd. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Alicia O'Connor. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Niamh Ní Lalaur. Seo tar éis bin seoirí de Cumann Ósta an rí a bheith sásta céim of cóididlí of runart, déanam hu a ghlacha is tí chun chlacha a gcuirtean in a héireann agus chlacha tú dáit ar bhain sin. Brendan Rooney. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Deirdre Ryan. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Neasa O'Callaghan. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Aoife McPartland. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Shauna Canary. The benchers of the Honourable Society of King's Inns, having been pleased to admit you to the degree of Barrister at Law, I now admit you to practice in the Courts of Ireland, and you will take your place accordingly. Now, each new barrister, and you all are now barristers, having been called to the Bar of Ireland, is entitled to practice in all of the Courts of Ireland, including here in the Supreme Court. And to illustrate that new status, I will ask each newly called member of the Bar whether they wish to move anything before the Court today. Mr. Moynihan, do you move anything? Mr. Hamilton, do you move anything? Ms. Dowd, do you move anything? Ms. O'Connor, do you move anything? Ms. Ní Lalaur, Elaine Rudla-Wallagot. Mr. Rooney, do you move anything? Ms. Ryan, do you move anything? Ms. O'Callaghan, do you move anything? Ms. McPartland, do you move anything? Ms. Canary, do you move anything? Now that concludes this formal ceremony, short though it is, of call to the Bar of Ireland. It only remains for me on my own behalf, but also on behalf of all of the other members of the Supreme Court, many of whom would in more normal times be sitting here on the bench with me, to extend congratulations to each of our newly called barristers and wish each and every one of you every happiness and success in the future.
All right.